In 1995, a single pirate movie lost so much money it bankrupted one of the most powerful studios in Hollywood. We'll get into it later. The 90s were when Hollywood learned to print money. Jurassic Park, Titanic, numbers nobody had seen. But for every record, another film was struggling. 80 million, 100 million, all lit on fire. And here's the twist. A lot of these failures are now classics. And the biggest disaster on this list quietly made possible one of the most profitable franchises ever. 10 films, counting down to the worst. Let's get into it. Number 10, The Hudsucker Proxy, 1994. $25 million budget. $11 million worldwide. About $14 million up in smoke. We start with the Coen brothers, except this is the Coen brothers before they were the Coen brothers. Fargo is still 2 years away. The Big Lebowski hasn't happened. So in 1994, Joel and Ethan are two weird guys Warner Brothers is co-financing kind of reluctantly. And what do they make? A screwball comedy. A throwback to 1940s Preston Sturges movies that nobody in 1994 was asking for. Tim Robbins plays a grinning idiot who accidentally runs a corporation. Jennifer Jason Leigh is doing a 100-mile-an-hour Katharine Hepburn impression. And the entire plot, the whole thing, hinges on the invention of the hula hoop. Warner Brothers took one look, had no idea how to sell it, and basically dumped it in a few theaters with a marketing campaign that couldn't explain what kind of movie it even was. Audiences walked in expecting something normal and walked out baffled. Here's the thing though, watch it now and it's gorgeous. Pneumatic mail tubes, Art Deco skyscrapers, this giant clockwork world the Coens built from scratch. And Paul Newman as the corporate villain is one of the most underrated performances of his career. After Fargo made the Coens' prestige darlings, people went back, found this, and went, oh, that little for kids hula hoop pitch became a meme decades later. The movie was never the problem. 1994 just wasn't ready for it. Number 9, Strange Days, 1995. $42 million budget. 17 million worldwide. Around 25 million gone. On paper, this one was bulletproof. Director Catherine Bigelow, fresh off Point Break. Co-written by James Cameron, at the absolute peak of his powers. You could not draw up a safer bet. And then they made the least safe movie imaginable. Strange Days is a 2.5-hour neo-noir set at the apocalyptic end of 1999, about black market dealers who sell recorded human memories, plugged straight into your brain. And it opens with a first-person POV sequence so disturbing I won't describe it here. This is a major studio release that opens by making you the camera inside someone's worst moment. Audiences in 1995 were not ready for that. Fox had no clue how to market it, so they sold it as a slick action thriller. It is absolutely not a slick action thriller. People felt ambushed, and it died. But here's what blows my mind. The technology at the center of this film, a device that records your actual sensory experience so someone else can live it later, that's POV content. That's the entire logic of how we film and watch each other now. Bigelow and Cameron looked at 1995 and described TikTok, neural interface debates, all of it. The movie's not a flop anymore. It's on university syllabuses. They didn't make a bad film. They made a documentary about a future that hadn't arrived yet. Number 8, Hocus Pocus, 1993. $28 million budget. 8.1 million domestic. A $16.5 million loss for Disney. This one's almost funny, because the movie's a beloved institution now, and people forget it completely bombed. And it bombed for the dumbest possible reason. Disney made a Halloween movie, a witchy, spooky, candy and cobwebs Halloween movie, and then they released it in July, the middle of summer. And not just any summer, the summer of 1993, when a little movie called Jurassic Park was sitting on the box office like a Tyrannosaurus and refusing to move. There was no oxygen left in any theater in America. Keep that dinosaur in mind, it's going to come back. Critics shrugged. Too scary for little kids, too silly for adults, nobody knew who it was for. Done. Dead. And then cable TV resurrected it from the grave. ABC Family started running it every single October, year after year, and an entire generation grew up catching it on TV and home video. Slowly, quietly, Hocus Pocus became the American Halloween movie, to the point where Disney made a sequel 30 years later in 2022. Bette Midler, who reportedly thought the role was beneath her at the time, now calls it one of the most fun things she ever did. The movie didn't fail. It just needed to be playing in October. Number 7, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, 1993. $6 million budget. 5.6 million domestic. Barely broke even. And that's the scandal. Here's a crime. Mask of the Phantasm was built as a direct-to-video movie. Then, at the last second, Warner Brothers changed its mind and shoved it into theaters with about 3 weeks of lead time. No campaign, no posters, no rollout. They dropped it on Christmas Day 1993 and it evaporated. And the reason it evaporated is the same reason it's so good. Everyone assumed it was a kid's cartoon. It is not a kid's cartoon. It's a mature, noir-soaked tragedy about a man drowning in grief who happens to dress as a bat. Nobody knew how to sell that to families looking for holiday entertainment. But ask serious Batman fans for the best Batman film ever made, and a lot of them won't say the Nolan movies. They won't say the Tim Burton one. They'll say this: Kevin Conroy as Batman and Mark Hamill as the Joker set the gold standard that every single live-action version since has been measured against, and usually found wanting. Nolan straight up borrowed from it. The idea that The Mask is about loss, not justice. Oh, and the script was written in 9 weeks because of that rushed theatrical pivot. They were writing pages while the animators were already drawing them. Total chaos. And it produced maybe the most emotionally devastating Batman story ever told. Number 6. True Romance, 1993. $12.5 million budget. $4 million domestic. A near total wipeout. Quentin Tarantino wrote this script before anyone knew his name. Before Reservoir Dogs turned him into a god. He sold it, and director Tony Scott made it his own way. Sunnier, more romantic, more polished than Tarantino ever would have shot it. And that's exactly what confused everyone. The marketing leaned hard into Christian Slater action movie. Car chases, shootouts, guns. But at its heart, it's a strange, tender, violent love story. People showed up for one thing and got another. The reviews were mixed, and in a crowded September 1993, it just slipped through the cracks. Now look at the cast list and try not to laugh. Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Brad Pitt, Gary Oldman, Christopher Walken, James Gandolfini in one of his first real roles. Today, this is one of the most studied screenplays on the planet. That single scene between Hopper and Walken at a kitchen table is taught as one of the best two-man scenes in American film. Here's the detail I love. Tarantino's original ending killed off the hero. Tony Scott refused and rewrote it so the couple lives. Tarantino hated that change. And decades later, half the fan base prefers Scott's version, which means people are still arguing about this flop today. That's not failure. That's a film that won't die. Number 5. The Iron Giant, 1999. $50 million budget. $31 million worldwide. A brutal loss for Warner Brothers. This is the one that genuinely makes me angry, because The Iron Giant didn't fail. It was failed. Warner Brothers had an animation division they didn't believe in. They saw it as a sad little competitor to Disney and DreamWorks. So when Brad Bird turned in this gorgeous, heartfelt film about a boy and a giant robot, the executives shrugged, slashed the marketing budget to almost nothing, and dumped it in August 1999 against The Sixth Sense. Most families in America never even heard the movie existed. Bird has spent years talking about the helplessness of watching something he was proud of just vanish, because the people who were supposed to sell it couldn't be bothered. And what they threw away is now considered one of the greatest American animated films ever made. Its core line, "You are who you choose to be," gets quoted like actual moral philosophy. The film was so good it landed Brad Bird at Pixar, where he made The Incredibles and found the massive audience this movie deserved. And the giant's voice? Vin Diesel. At the lowest point of his career, before The Fast and the Furious, working for almost no money. He's called it one of the most meaningful roles he ever played, a career-saving performance in a movie nobody was allowed to see. Number 4, The Postman, 1997. $80 million budget. $20 million worldwide. Warner Brothers lost around $60 million. Kevin Costner had just earned the biggest blank check in Hollywood. Dances with Wolves, $424 million, Best Picture, the works. So when he wanted to direct himself in a 3-hour post-apocalyptic epic about a drifter who impersonates a mailman and accidentally reignites American civilization, they let him. It opened on Christmas Day, 1997. And do you remember what else was in theaters 2 weeks earlier, eating every single dollar in the country? Titanic. Remember the iceberg? It's coming back at number 1. Costner's mailman epic sailed straight into it. The reviews had already savaged the film before it even opened. It got nominated for Worst Picture at the Golden Globes. It opened at number 9, 9th place, with $5 million. It hasn't become a beloved cult classic, I'll be honest. It's still too long and too self-serious. But its themes have aged into relevance. institutional collapse, how a society can reorganize itself around a symbol in a story. And historically, it matters enormously, because the Postman permanently killed the whole Kevin Costner directs himself in a sprawling epic era of Hollywood. They teach this one in film finance programs as a cautionary tale. Legend has it, an exec begged him to cut it from 3 hours to 2, warning audiences would walk out after 2. Costner said they'd stay if the story was worth it. They did not stay. Number 3, Last Action Hero, 1993. $85 million budget, $137 million worldwide. But after marketing, Columbia ended up losing between $20 and $26 million. Columbia Pictures was so sure about this one. Summer, 1993. Arnold Schwarzenegger, still the biggest action star alive. This was going to be the unstoppable blockbuster that extended his reign forever. They were so confident they spent an obscene amount on marketing, including, and I am not making this up, paying to put the Last Action Hero logo on the side of a NASA rocket. They launched their advertising into space, and then Steven Spielberg moved Jurassic Park up 2 weeks, landing the dinosaur right on top of them. Told you it'd be back. Same summer, third victim. Arnold's movie opened to $15 million, which would be fine for almost anything, and a catastrophe for this. On top of that, the film itself was a clever, self-aware satire about a kid who jumps into an action movie and discovers it's logically ridiculous. And audiences who showed up for straight Arnold carnage left scratching their heads. Here's the vindication, and it's a good one. That premise, a character who knows he's in a dumb action movie and starts poking holes in it, that's Deadpool. That's a $780 million franchise. Last Action Hero did it in 1993, 15 years before the audience for it existed. Arnold says it's one of the films he's proudest of. And the cherry on top, Columbia had pre-sold global tie-in deals to McDonald's, Burger King, Coke, all of them, before the movie was even finished. When it bombed, they were contractually locked into promoting their own disaster. That kind of overreach scared Hollywood into more cautious marketing for years. Number 2, Waterworld, 1995. $175 million official budget, really over $300 million. $264 million worldwide. Over $100 million down the hole. You knew this one was coming. Waterworld, the most expensive film ever made at the time. And everybody knew it, because the ballooning cost leaked to the press early and poisoned the whole thing before a single ticket was sold. The production was a nightmare you couldn't write. They shot on the open Pacific Ocean. The gigantic main set sank, twice. A hurricane destroyed millions of dollars of construction. Costner's stunt double nearly drowned, and his divorce played out in the tabloids the entire time. The press had a nickname ready, Kevin's Gate, after Heaven's Gate, the movie that bankrupted a studio in 1980. So by the time it opened, audiences were either expecting the greatest action film ever made or a smoking crater, and they got something in between. A perfectly entertaining movie that simply was not $300 million worth of entertaining. But here's the truth nobody mentions. Waterworld technically made its money back, $264 million worldwide, and it's aged beautifully. That insane practical work, the giant trimaran, the floating cities built from salvage, real jet ski chases, is exactly the kind of physical filmmaking that's basically impossible to afford now. Its waterlogged dystopia influenced Mad Max, Fury Road, and a whole genre of climate fiction. And the ultimate irony? The Universal Studios stunt show based on Waterworld has been running for nearly 30 years and is one of the most popular theme park attractions on Earth. The flop that became a fixture. The director, Kevin Reynolds, quit before it was finished and left Costner to edit it himself. And the restored, longer cut is now considered better than what theaters got. Number 1, Cutthroat Island, 1995. A budget between $98 and $115 million, $10 million worldwide. The single largest box office loss in film history. And here it is. The reason I made this whole video. Cutthroat Island holds the Guinness World Record for the biggest box office loss in cinema history. $10 million earned against a budget north of $100. But the number isn't even the story. The story is what it took down with it. This is the film that bankrupted Carolco Pictures, the studio behind Terminator 2, Rambo, and Total Recall. One of the most powerful independent studios on the planet. Gone because of a pirate movie. And it failed at every level at once. Carolco was already drowning in debt and greenlit this as a desperate last bet. Distribution got handed to MGM right as MGM was being swallowed in its own corporate takeover, so nobody was minding the store. The studio wanted Michael Douglas, then Keanu Reeves, then Jeff Bridges, all passed, and ended up with Gina Davis and Matthew Modine, who are wonderful, but were not proven action draws. Pirates as a genre had been dead since the 1950s. Nobody believed audiences wanted swashbuckling in 1995. And director Renny Harlin refused to rein in the ballooning budget. It opened Christmas Day 1995 to $2.3 million. Carolco filed for bankruptcy almost immediately. Now here's the twist, the thing that makes this number one. Cutthroat Island didn't just kill a studio, it killed an entire genre. For nearly a decade afterward, pirate movie was Hollywood's shorthand for box office suicide. When Jerry Bruckheimer tried to make Pirates of the Caribbean in the early 2000s, executives kept pointing at Cutthroat Island as proof it couldn't work. He had to fight them off. And when Pirates made $654 million worldwide, it retroactively turned this disaster into the cautionary tale that made one of the biggest franchises in history possible. And it goes deeper. When Carolco's assets were auctioned off in bankruptcy, one of the projects on the table was a film James Cameron had been developing with them, about the Titanic. The collapse forced Cameron to move the project to Fox and Paramount, where it became the highest-grossing movie ever made. Sit with that. The same iceberg that sank The Postman at number 4. The biggest flop on this list may have been the thing that set it loose. Cutthroat Island bankrupted a studio, and in doing so, may have accidentally made Titanic happen. The biggest failure of the decade quietly enabled the biggest success. That's not a flop. That's a legend. So that's 10 films, a few $100 million, and a whole lot of carnage. And if there's one thing they have in common, it's this. Almost none of them were actually bad. They were too early. They were in the wrong theater on the wrong weekend. They picked a fight with a dinosaur or an iceberg or their own studio and lost. But watch them now, and most of them hold up better than half of what's streaming tonight. So I want to know, how many of these had you actually seen? Which one do you think deserves a full reappraisal? And what's the 90s flop I missed that you'd put on this list? Drop it in the comments, I read them.